The silence in the house was a living thing, a presence that had settled in the corners and grown fat on the echoes of a life that once was. I, Helen Margaret Albright, sat at the kitchen table, a relic in a museum of my own making. The morning sun streamed through the bay window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny memory of Frank, of a time when this house echoed with debates about politics and the quiet rustle of turning pages, not the cacophony of children's television and the constant, low-grade hum of my own erasure. My own daughter thought my love had a price tag. The thought didn't arrive with drama, but with the cold, sickening certainty of a diagnosis. It was a cheap price tag, negotiable, to be paid in the crumbling currency of my dignity and the silent, daily erosion of my selfhood. The transaction was finalized not in a bank with the sterile whisper of paperwork and the impersonal handshake of a teller, but on the glowing, intimate screen of my smartphone, a device that had transformed from a tool of connection into a treacherous window to a world that now felt alien, judgmental, and cruelly superficial. She had posted a reel on Instagram. I'd stumbled upon it after a morning spent in the trenches of grandmotherhood. It was one of those slick, fast-paced, and ruthlessly edited "get ready with me" videos that her generation devoured like digital candy, a fleeting hit of serotonin wrapped in the illusion of authentic intimacy. In it, she was a vision of composed modernity, applying her expensive serum and foundation with practiced, graceful strokes, her face a canvas of serene perfection against the backdrop of her tastefully decorated, marble-topped bathroom. The camera, as if by accidental, whimsical chance, but with the calculated precision of a documentary filmmaker framing their subject for maximum impact, panned away from her flawless facade and found me in the background of the open-plan living area. It was a shot of pure, unvarnished domestic chaos, my body turned away from the lens, my shoulders slumped with a fatigue that had seeped into my very marrow, my fingers, once capable of crafting intricate lesson plans and grading essays with insightful marginalia, now fumbling clumsily as I tried to tame my granddaughter's flyaway, corn silk hair into a simple, presentable braid. My grandson, little Sam, was a blur of frantic motion and discordant sound, tugging at the hem of my worn, pilled cardigan, his voice a plaintive, escalating wail for a snack, his face crumpled in the unique, profound despair of a 3-year-old whose immediate needs are not instantly met. The caption beneath this curated slice of our life was what truly shattered me, what turned the digital image into a weapon that lanced straight through my heart and left a wound that felt both searing and icy cold. It read, "Shout out to the built-in, 24/7 babysitter. What would we do without desperate grandmas with empty calendars? #MomWin, #free childcare, #blessed, #desperate grandmas." I stared at the words until they blurred and swam in the hot, unshed tears that pricked at my eyes, a burning pressure building behind them. I could feel the fragile architecture of my composure, so carefully maintained over a lifetime of classroom management and personal loss, beginning to crack and splinter. The comments below were a savage, gleeful parade of laughing face emojis and hollow affirmations that felt like punches to the gut. Goals, one person wrote, as if my captured humiliation was an aspiration, a life milestone to be coveted. "You are so lucky," exclaimed another, their envy a bitter mockery of my situation. "This is the dream," declared a third. "Wish my mom was this useful and knew her place," added a fourth, each word a tiny, sharp stone added to the heavy, suffocating weight settling in my chest. I closed the app with a jerky, uncoordinated movement, my hands trembling so violently I nearly fumbled the phone onto the tiled kitchen floor. The device felt suddenly heavy, toxic, a Pandora's box of public humiliation and private pain I had foolishly opened in a moment of seeking simple, mindless connection to the world beyond my four walls. But the worst part, the detail that felt like a shard of glass being deliberately twisted in the wound, was the hashtag she had chosen, nestled amongst the others like a venomous snake in a garden of pretty flowers. The word echoed in the silent, sunlit room, mocking me, reducing 65 years of a rich, complex, and fiercely independent life to a single, pathetic label. I was 65 years old. My name is Helen Margaret Albright. For 35 years, I had stood in front of classrooms of restless, skeptical, and brilliant teenagers, shaping young minds, introducing them to the complex beauties of Shakespearean sonnets and the rigorous, elegant logic of a well-constructed sentence. I had guided them through the tumultuous landscapes of adolescence, had written college recommendation letters that poured my belief in their potential onto the page, had mourned the loss of a student to a car accident, and had celebrated their triumphs as if they were my own. I had a teacher's pension that, combined with my late husband Frank's careful, prudent investments, afforded me a comfortable, independent life, free from financial worry. In my bedside drawer, tucked beneath a pile of silk scarves collected from travels around the world, was a passport filled with colorful stamps and faded visas from a life lived vigorously and on my own terms before they needed me, before the gentle, yet relentless, demands of grandmotherhood had quietly, insidiously become the central, all-consuming axis of my existence. I had hiked the windy, rocky, breathtaking trails of Patagonia, feeling the fierce, clean air whip my hair and redden my cheeks, my lungs burning with effort and exhilaration. I had wandered through the hushed, reverent halls of the Louvre, standing for minutes that felt like hours before the Mona Lisa's enigmatic smile, feeling a connection to history and artistry that transcended time. Just last year, I had taught a weekly class on Shakespeare's tragedies to a group of enthusiastic, whip-smart seniors at the local community center, their life-worn insights and sharp observations often putting my former students to shame. Desperate? The audacity, the sheer, breathtaking inaccuracy of it, stole the air from my lungs and left me dizzy. In that moment, gazing at my pale, shocked reflection in the dark, accusing screen of my phone, I made a silent, ironclad vow. I would show my daughter, Chloe, what a truly, deliberately, and powerfully empty calendar looked like. The reckoning of Helen Albright was about to begin. The memory of that digital betrayal was still a fresh, throbbing wound hours later, a ghost that lingered in the air of the now quiet house. When Chloe came home from her evening Vinyas flow class, flushed and glowing with a serene, self-congratulatory accomplishment, the house she entered was unervingly, profoundly silent. She stood in the foyer, her expensive, sticky mat slung over her shoulder, her head cocked, listening for the familiar, chaotic soundtrack of her life, the shrieks of playing children, the blare of the television, my voice gently chiding or encouraging, the clatter of dishes. She was met with a quiet so deep and complete she could hear the low, persistent hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the frantic, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock that had belonged to my own grandmother and marked the passage of a time that now felt stolen from me. She couldn't believe what she wasn't hearing. I watched her from the shadowed doorway to the living room, my arms crossed over my chest, my heart a wild, frantic drum against my ribs, a cacophony of hurt and burgeoning defiance. I never thought, after a lifetime dedicated to the cultivation of knowledge and the nurturing of young intellects, that my own child, my only daughter, would look at me and see a vacant mind, a convenient vessel for her domestic needs, my time a worthless, infinitely available commodity to be spent entirely at her discretion. The irony was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth, a poison I had been swallowing for years without realizing it. It was a Tuesday morning when I had first seen the video. I remember the specific, sensory details of that moment with painful, hyperreal clarity, as if they had been branded into my memory by a hot iron. The room smelled of the bright, artificial, slightly sweet scent of the blue Play-Doh I was kneading for Sam, a lump of vibrant cobalt under my work-roughened palms. From the television in the corner, the relentlessly cheerful, synthesized theme song of a popular cartoon played on a loop, a soundtrack I knew by heart, its inane lyrics and catchy melody a constant, mind-numbing backdrop to my days. She couldn't believe what she wasn't hearing. I watched her from the shadowed doorway to the living room, my arms crossed over my chest, my heart a wild, frantic drum against my ribs, a cacophony of hurt and burgeoning defiance. I never thought, after a lifetime dedicated to the cultivation of knowledge and the nurturing of young intellects, that my own child, my only daughter, would look at me and see a vacant mind, a convenient vessel for her domestic needs, my time a worthless, infinitely available commodity to be spent entirely at her discretion. The irony was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth, a poison I had been swallowing for years without realizing it. It was a Tuesday morning when I had first seen the video. I remember the specific, sensory details of that moment with painful, hyperreal clarity, as if they had been branded into my memory by a hot iron. The room smelled of the bright, artificial, slightly sweet scent of the blue Play-Doh I was kneading for Sam, a lump of vibrant cobalt under my work-roughened palms. From the television in the corner, the relentlessly cheerful, synthesized theme song of a popular cartoon played on a loop, a soundtrack I knew by heart, its inane lyrics and catchy melody a constant, mind-numbing backdrop to my days. There her face was, my beautiful Chloe, with her father's warm, hazel eyes and my own determined smile, smirking directly into the camera. Her voice, so familiar and dear, the voice that had called for me in the night for years, that had whispered secrets and shouted in teenage anger, now felt like a stranger's, slick with performance and a desperate need for external validation. "Let's be real, folks," she said, her tone conspiratorial and polished. "I don't pay for daycare, I pay in guilt trips and leftover casseroles." She laughed, a tinkling, performative sound that held no real joy, only the hollow ring of someone playing to an unseen audience. The camera, as it had before, swung on its axis to capture my back, hunched over in my stretched out, pilled, heather gray cardigan, the one I always wore not for style, but because it was soft as a whisper, smelled faintly of baby powder and my own lavender laundry detergent, and was perfect for absorbing the tears and sticky fingerprints of small, upset children. Then, my eyes, against my will, dragged down to the comments section, a digital abyss I felt myself falling into. They were a torrent of validation for her, and a quiet, systematic annihilation for me. "LOL, that's what they're for," one person had written, as if I were a kitchen appliance or a municipal utility, a function, not a person with a history, dreams, and a soul. "Grandmas earn their keep with babysitting," declared another, reducing a lifetime of love, sacrifice, and accumulated wisdom to a simple, crude transaction, a balancing of ledgers. "My mom would kill for this much time with her grandkids, your mom is lucky you let her help." Their shared laughter, light and careless and utterly devoid of malice, yet full of a casual, unthinking cruelty, floated into the kitchen and wrapped around my throat like a silken noose, tightening with every shared peal, cutting off my air, my hope, my last connection to the illusion that I was a beloved matriarch and not a convenient domestic appliance. That was the moment. That was the precise, crystalline second when the last vestige of my complacency evaporated, when the scales fell from my eyes not with a gradual dawning, but with the finality of a guillotine's blade. That's when I stopped being desperate. That's when the tears dried up, replaced by a cold, clear-eyed fury. That's when Helen Albright, retired educator, world traveler, and lover of poetry, decided to come out of retirement, not for a substitute teaching position, but for the most important fight of her life, the battle for her own soul. A cold, clear clarity settled over me, washing away the hurt and replacing it with a steely, unshakable resolve. I finished washing the plate in my hand, dried it meticulously with a checkered towel, and put it away in the cupboard, the familiar click of the china a sound of finality, the end of an era. I walked calmly, purposefully, my back straight for the first time in days, to my home office, a small, sunlit room that had, over the past 5 years, largely become a repository for grandchildren's art supplies, half-empty sticker books, and forgotten toys. The spines of my beloved books on the shelves seemed to watch me, silently urging me to remember the woman who had once devoured them. In the bottom drawer of the old oak desk, beneath a stack of old watercolor paintings and crayon sketches that proclaimed, "I love you Grammy," in shaky, heartfelt letters, I found my old, beautiful, butter-soft leather-bound planner. It was from 2 years ago, from the year before my granddaughter, Kyla, was born, when my life was still recognizably, joyfully my own. I opened it, the soft leather cool and familiar beneath my fingertips. The pages for that spring were a beautiful, vibrant mosaic of a life that was lived for myself, by myself, dinner with Eleanor at the Oyster Bar, 7:30, Shakespeare class prep, King Lear Act 3, dentist 10 a.m., book club, my turn to host. Make those lemon scones, weekend trip to the coast with the hiking group, pack rain jacket. The summer was even more vibrant, filled with travel plans, museum visits, and learning workshops. I traced the entries with a trembling finger, a powerful wave of grief and furious nostalgia for the woman I had allowed myself to become washing over me, a riptide of regret and determination. I picked up my phone, my hands now perfectly steady with a newfound, terrifying purpose. My first call was to Eleanor. Her voice, warm and familiar and laced with a perpetual hint of amusement, was a balm to my ragged spirit, a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. "Eleanor," I said, my voice low but firm, leaving no room for argument or pity. "It's Helen. Are you and the group still planning that 7-day hiking trip through the Blue Ridge Mountain Trails next week? The one you've been badgering me about for months? The one with the professional guide?" "Helen? Of course we are. We finalized the bookings last week. But I thought you said you couldn't possibly, the kids. Chloe's work schedule, you were locked in. My schedule, I interrupted, a grim, determined smile finally touching my lips, a smile that felt foreign on my face, has undergone a sudden and permanent revision. Consider the lock picked. I'm in. Book my spot. Tell me what I need to bring. I want a packing list. I want the itinerary. I want everything. There was a brief, stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a delighted, booming laugh that echoed down the line. Well, hallelujah. The prodigal daughter returns. I knew you had it in you. I'll call the guide service right now and get your name on the roster. Get your boots ready, Albright, you're in for a real workout. These aren't your neighborhood nature trails. My next call was to the local community college's continuing education department. I inquired about the Pottery Wheel class for beginners that I had circled in their course catalog months ago, a catalog that had been buried under a pile of preschool flyers, pediatrician appointment reminders, and permission slips for field trips I was expected to chaperone. Is there still availability in the Thursday evening session? I asked the polite, young-sounding woman on the phone. When she confirmed there was, miraculously, one spot left, I didn't hesitate. I didn't check my calendar. I didn't wonder if I could find a sitter. I gave her my credit card number and recited my address without a second thought. Sign me up, I said, the words feeling like a declaration of independence, a small, significant act of rebellion. Then, I took a deep, fortifying breath, the air feeling cleaner in my lungs, and made the call that felt the most definitive, the one that would cement my new reality and make retreat impossible, the one that would build a moat around my newfound freedom. I scrolled through my contacts and found the number for Brenda Shackleton, a sharp, efficient, no-nonsense real estate agent who had sold my neighbor's house in a record 2 weeks. Brenda, I said, my voice betraying no emotion, cool and professional. It's Helen Albright. I'm interested in renting out my spare room, the one with the private bathroom and the separate entrance. I'm thinking a 6-month lease, fully furnished. Perhaps to a traveling nurse at the university hospital or a quiet, mature graduate student. Can you help me with that? I want it handled professionally, with a proper, ironclad contract, thorough background checks, and a solid security deposit. I'm not looking for a friend, I'm looking for a tenant. Brenda, to her credit, asked no prying questions. She didn't ask if everything was okay at home. She simply said, consider it done, Helen. I'll draw up the standard paperwork and get it over to you by tomorrow for your signature. I may already have a lead, a visiting professor from Germany coming to the political science department for the fall semester. He's looking for a quiet, furnished place. This could be perfect. The plan was set. The wheels were in motion. I felt a strange, electric energy coursing through my veins, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, a sensation that was both terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. It was the thrill of autonomy, the intoxicating power of making a decision solely for oneself, without running it by a committee of my daughter's needs. It was the feeling of taking the helm of my own ship after years of letting others steer it onto the rocks. I was terrified. I was alive. That night, I slept a deep, dreamless, untroubled sleep, the sleep of the resolved, of those who have made a hard decision and are prepared to live with the consequences. There were no visions of crying grandchildren or mocking hashtags. There was only a profound, restorative darkness. The next morning, I was up before the sun, as had been my habit for decades, a rhythm ingrained from years of preparing for a 7:30 a.m. homeroom. The routine was muscle memory, a ghost of my old life haunting the kitchen. I measured the flour, cracked the eggs, stirred the batter until it was smooth and free of lumps. The rich, buttery, comforting scent of pancakes filled the kitchen, a scent that usually signaled the beginning of another long, demanding day of servitude, of wiping noses and mediating toy disputes and preparing endless snacks. I made a full, golden, perfect stack, just as I always did, and set them on the table with a pitcher of maple syrup. But when Chloe came down, yawning, her hair a messy bun, still in her expensive silk pajamas, expecting me to hand her a steaming mug of coffee and immediately take over the vigil of the children, she found a different scene entirely, a tableau that stopped her in her tracks and wiped the sleep from her face in an instant. I was standing by the front door, dressed not in my soft cardigan and comfortable, elastic waist slacks, but in my sturdy, scarred, lovingly worn and hiking boots, broken in from trips long past, and a pair of rugged, olive green, moisture-wicking cargo pants with more pockets than I could possibly need. A loaded, professional-grade backpack stood propped against the wall next to me like a loyal sentinel, a sleeping bag rolled into a tight, compact cylinder and strapped to the bottom with practiced efficiency. I was in the process of checking the contents of a water bladder, ensuring the hose was clear. Chloe stopped short, her sleep-addled brain struggling to process the incongruous image, the disconnect between the expected scene of domestic submission and the reality of a woman prepared for an expedition. "Mom?" she asked, her voice thick with confusion and the first stirrings of a deep, primal alarm. "What's going on? What are you wearing? Where are you going? Is everything okay?" "Eleanor and I are leaving for a week," I said, my voice unnervingly calm, almost conversational, as if I were announcing I was going to the grocery store or the post office. I reached for the insulated travel mug I had prepared for myself and poured the last of the dark, aromatic coffee from the pot into it, the stream of liquid steady and sure. "We're hiking the full 7-day circuit through the state park. The Appalachian Trail section. The one your father and I always talked about doing, but we never found the time. Life, as it does, got in the way." The mention of her late father, Frank, a man who had cherished adventure and had always spoken of our golden years as a time of exploration and shared discovery, was a deliberate, subtle blow, a reminder of promises I had let languish, of dreams I had deferred for the sake of a family that now seemed to view my sacrifices with contempt. I then picked up a neatly printed, detailed, 2-page document from the hall table and handed it to her. Her eyes, still puffy with sleep, scanned the page, her confusion rapidly deepening into dawning, panicked horror as she took in the dense columns of times, activities, and instructions. "Here is the children's comprehensive schedule," I explained, my tone that of a competent executive handing over a complex project to a junior colleague, devoid of the maternal warmth and softness she was accustomed to. "Preschool pickup is at 3 p.m. sharp. They charge a substantial late fee, $5 per minute, after 3:15. Samuel is critically allergic to strawberries. It's listed on the emergency medical form in the blue folder in the top kitchen drawer, along with the pediatrician's number, our insurance information, and the location of the EpiPens. There are 2, one in the kitchen drawer, one in my purse, which I am, obviously, taking with me. Kyla's ballet class is on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Her leotard and pink tights are in the second drawer of her dresser. Her hair needs to be in a tight bun, not a ponytail. You'll need to arrange backup care for the hours between when you finish work and when you can pick them up. I've also listed a few excellent, highly recommended, paid nanny services at the bottom, with their contact information, current hourly rates, and my notes on their interviewing processes. I'm told they start at around $25 to $30 an hour, depending on experience and number of children. Overtime is time and a half after 40 hours. Her face was a perfect mask of shock, her mouth slightly agape. The paper trembled visibly in her hand, a flutter of white in the morning light. "A week," she choked out, her voice rising an octave, tinged with disbelief and a building panic. "Mom, you can't be serious. This isn't funny. I can't, my work. I have back-to-back meetings all week, including a huge, make-or-break presentation for a new client on Thursday. My entire quarter depends on it. Mark is in Denver for a sales conference. He doesn't get back until Sunday. This is impossible. You know our schedule. You are our schedule." I met her panicked, wide-eyed gaze, my own expression serene, my posture straight and unyielding, my feet planted firmly in my hiking boots. "I know," I said calmly, snapping the lid onto my travel mug with a definitive, resonant click that seemed to echo in the tense silence of the hallway. "It's very demanding, isn't it? Managing a complex schedule, coordinating care, being responsible for every minute of someone else's day, anticipating their needs, sacrificing your own plans and desires. It's a lot to keep track of. It requires immense organizational skill, foresight, and personal sacrifice. It's a full-time job in itself. Good luck." I walked over to my grandchildren, who were watching the exchange from the breakfast table with wide, curious, slightly worried eyes, syrup smeared around their mouths like clown makeup. I bent down, my knees complaining only slightly, a familiar ache I chose to ignore, and kissed each of them softly on the forehead, inhaling their sweet, childish scent of maple syrup and sleep one last time, committing it to memory. "Be good for your mommy," I whispered, my voice catching only for a second, a tiny fracture in my armor that I quickly sealed. "Grammy loves you very much." Then, without a backward glance, without a hug of reassurance, without a word of comfort or a list of last-minute instructions, I hoisted the heavy, reassuring weight of the backpack onto my shoulders, adjusted the straps with a practiced tug, opened the front door, and walked out into the crisp, promising, free morning air. I didn't look at the flower beds I had weeded, or the lawn I had mowed. I walked straight towards Eleanor's dusty, dependable, adventure-ready SUV idling at the curb, its trunk open and packed with other backpacks and gear. As I opened the passenger door and slid in, placing my backpack at my feet, I allowed myself one last, fleeting glance in the side view mirror at the house I had shared with Frank, the house I had made a home, the house that had recently become my gilded cage. Chloe was still standing on the porch, frozen like a statue in a museum of domestic tragedy, the printed schedule clutched in her hand like a useless map to a country she had never intended to visit, a language she had never bothered to learn. Her phone, the instrument of her social media triumph, the source of all her wins and digital validation, was conspicuously absent from her grasp. For once, it offered her no solutions, no likes, no commiserating comments, no quick fixes. It was utterly, completely, devastatingly useless in the face of this new, stark, unmediated reality. Eleanor glanced at me as she shifted the car into drive and pulled away from the curb, the tires crunching on the gravel. She didn't say anything for a moment, just let the silence sit between us, a comfortable, understanding silence. Then, she asked, her eyes full of knowing sympathy and unspoken pride, "Everything okay, Helen?" "Really?" I took a long, slow, savoring sip of my hot, bitter, life-giving coffee, watching my daughter's stunned, shrinking figure in the side view mirror until we turned the corner at the end of the street and she disappeared from view, swallowed by the familiar landscape of a life I was choosing to leave behind, if only for a week. "Everything," I said, a genuine, liberated, unburdened smile finally spreading across my face for the first time in years, a smile that reached my eyes and lit them from within, "is absolutely perfect." The war for my identity, for my time, for my very soul, wasn't one with shouted arguments or tearful recriminations. It wasn't one with guilt trips or passive-aggressive comments. It was one with a silent, determined, purposeful exit. It was one with a backpack, a printed schedule, and the simple, unassailable act of choosing myself. It was one with the support of a true friend and the reclaiming of a long-dormant passion for my own life. And my calendar? I opened my new, pristine, beautifully, promisingly blank planner on my lap. For the first Tuesday in over 5 years, it did not read "Babysit Kyla and Sam." It read, in my own bold, decisive, capital letters, "Freedom." Day 1. The trail awaits. For the first time in 5 years, it was gloriously, triumphantly, unapologetically full of me. And as Eleanor drove us towards the looming, beautiful mountains, their peaks touching the clouds, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, a certainty that felt like truth, that it would never be empty again.